Hi, this is Mark from Wiki Design. In this Slider Revolution tutorial, I'm going to show you how to build out this custom-based carousel from scratch. This can be a really useful way to show off your dynamic content in a more fun and interactive way. And another really good thing about this carousel is it can be reused multiple times throughout your website. So for example, you can have this with different categories, or even if you have an e-commerce store, you can set up a slider like this on your website. So without wasting any more time, let's just jump into the tutorial. The first thing we need to do is figure out what category you want to show in this carousel. And then we need to make sure that we have the following things. Each post has a featured image like this. You, of course, are going to have your title, and then we're going to have your excerpt right here. So you need to make sure that you have all of that stuff first before you jump into Slide Revolution. So what I wanted to do in this example was I have a category called Elementor, and I just wanted to show 10 different posts. So the 10 most recent posts, I wanted to make sure I have everything ready. So if I jump into the back end right here, you can see I have 11 items. So I'm not going to be showing the very last one right here. So what you need to do is make sure that, like I said, you have everything set up. So let me jump into this right here. So I'm underneath the Elementor. You can see right here the category called Elementor. And you're going to want to make sure, like in this example, I have my featured image in here. And then depending on how you have your back end, this is without using Gutenberg or anything, but you see right here where it says excerpt, you got to make sure that you have something in here. And later in the tutorial, we're going to limit this to about 10 words. So it looks really good. So right here, we have it as 10 words. You can see, let me go back into something like this and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 words, and then we have it add the 3 dots right here, which is automatic, and then they can click read more. So depending on how you want to set this up, I wouldn't recommend going more than like 8 to 10 words. It looks pretty good when you do it like that. So yeah, like I said, you're going to want to make sure that you go through all of your posts and make sure that you have those assets. Now, that's going to be one of the most important things, because if you don't have that, it will just start to pull in all of this text content right here, and you're not going to have any control over how it looks. So do that first, and then now you can jump into the next part of the tutorial. So now that you have all of your posts set up with your featured image, your title, your excerpts, everything, now we can jump into Slider Revolution. But before we do that, let's just take a quick look at what's going on here. So as you can see right here, we have one post right here, and then we have 2 other ones showing. And what's cool is you can have it where these are a little bit smaller, so these scale down to like 75%. We have your arrows right here so the user can navigate. We have a progress bar right here, or a circle, so they know when it's going to go to the next slide. And then you can always have your hand and just pull it over. So on mobile, this works really well and smooth. So you can see right here. So now let's jump into the back end and show you how I have everything set up. The first thing we need to do is click this button, New Blank Module, and then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to break this video out into different sections so you can jump around using the timestamps below. This is going to require a lot of different clicks and a lot of different settings, so I might jump around a little bit, but I'm going to try to keep it very organized. So you can close that down right here. And if you're kind of new to Slider Revolution, the interface does take some time to learn. There is a lot of features in this program, so it is overwhelming the very first time you kind of jump into this. But the way it works is, you see these 4 tabs right up here? These are going to be the most important sections. So the very first one is your general options, then your navigation options, which mean these little buttons right here. So anything where the user can interact. So you can have arrows here. The progress thing is down here. And then if you had like bullets, that would all be underneath there. And then slide options, this is where a lot of your different slide options are. You don't really go into these settings too much, so we might not really need to mess with too much underneath here. And then this is going to be one of the more important ones, is once we start to add layers, which, for example, this is a layer, the image is a layer, that title is a layer, everything is like a layer. And then that's where a lot of your settings are. So we're going to spend most of our time within the general options right here, and then the layers. So the very first thing is, let's go into here and we need to tell it what it's going to be. So as you can see right here, by default, it wants to stay as a slider, but we need to change this over into a carousel. We can do full width right here. And when you do that, you're going to notice that it's going to cut off right here. So that's showing you where the end of the carousel is. That's way too wide. We want it to be a lot more narrow so you can show multiple things. So I have it around 450, and then around 550 pixels was pretty good. So as you can see right here, this is now the width of your main slider. So if we go back into here, that's what this is right here. About 450 pixels wide, 550 high. Now we can click up here to Carousel, and we're going to be changing out some options in here. I do recommend keeping this to snap to X alignment. So that means that when the user's going, it's going to snap into place. Infinite scroll, you probably want to keep this on because this is going to make it where it's just going to keep going rather than the user end and then have to go back to the beginning. So we have that on. And visible layers, you can click this to always on all slide. And then this is a really cool feature right here. So this right here is how many slides you want visible. So if I change this to 1, you're going to notice those colors disappear on the side. So in this case, we want to have 3. So you can see right here, there's actually 3 different cards. So we got 1, 2, and 3. So if you wanted to add more, you can always toggle that on. But in this case, let's just keep that at 3. And then if we scroll down, we can change out a few different options right here. Under effects, let's keep this fade on. And then right here where it says scale, let's change that to 75%. So what that's going to do is these right here are at 75% scale. This is at 100. So that's what gives that effect. So once you do that, just hit save. And now we have our carousel right here in the middle, which is empty. And now we have these other ones at 75%. If you change this effect right here, this 100 to let's say 50, this is what it will look like right here. So if I go back and hit refresh, you're going to notice this has about a 50% fade. So if you aren't sure what that fade is, that's what these ones on the side are going to look like. So I'm going to change that one back to 100%, just so the user can see it a lot easier. And so when I change that back to 100%, it will go where the user can see everything a little bit better. So personal preference, if you want to change that fade effect, that's where that number is right here. So that's the carousel settings. We might be going back and forth between some of these, but just get everything set up first. And then once you add all of the other stuff, the layers, it will all start to make sense. So now let's jump into content. This is a really important one. This is where you're going to be pulling in what is the content. So by default, it's custom, which would mean just bring in everything. But in this case, we want to do post base. You can keep this at post. And then what this is going to do is pull in, just like it says, your post. And then right down here is where you're going to choose your category. So in this case, we want to make sure that we have Elementor selected. So we just go into here. And you're just going to scroll down for Elementor, had 11 items. So once you click that, that's all you have to do right there. In this case, I wanted to sort by date. But as you can see, you could sort by title, slug, author. They give you a lot of different options in here for your query. But let's just do date descending, so it goes down. And then there's some really useful settings down here. I wanted to just show the first 10. So let's just type in 10 here. And then, like I said earlier, we're going to come back to this, but you could just type in 10 words. What this is going to do is, just like it says, pull in 10 words from your excerpt. What I noticed is if you don't put a limit on that, or if you have it by default and you have a really long excerpt, some might be shorter, some might be longer. So it's really good to kind of control the height of these things because, for example, if you have one and it's like a paragraph long, this slide is going to be all out of whack now. So that's why you need to be able to control these type of settings and override it, because if you don't, a lot of your slides are just going to look, the design's going to look off, so it's not going to look good. So that's what that is right here. So just do 10 words, hit save, and of course nothing's going to appear yet, but we can always come back and change this. And now we can jump into defaults, and if you want to change some settings here, you can. As you can see right here, it's at 9,000 milliseconds, which is like 9 seconds. So what that's going to do is how long it's the duration going to be for each slide. So how long is it going to take to transition in between each one? Let's change this to like 4,000. That would be a little bit faster. And then you can keep all of these on by default. Let's go underneath general. Let's change out some settings in here. And you're going to want to make sure that you have this on right here, the auto rotate slideshow. So that's going to automatically start going in between each of your slides. So you want to keep that on. If you don't want that on, you can always click this on right here and it will just have it where it stops, if that makes sense. Or you can just click it off, I believe. But in this case, let's just keep that on. And if you scroll down, I believe everything else I'm just going to keep by default. So you can just keep all that by default. And that's it for these settings, I believe, right now. Just hit save. Now we're going to go ahead and start to add these different layers in. So we're going to start with the image and then just kind of work our way down. Now we're going to start adding the layers to this slider, and now everything's going to start to come to life. So there's two different ways you can do this, and one of them is you can just click or just hover over where it says add layer and just start to bring in these things individually. But what I'm going to do is a little bit different, and you see this button right here called row. What this is going to do is keep everything in rows and columns, and so this is going to make it a lot easier once you have everything set up, and it will all start to snap in place, and it's just going to make it a lot easier to work with moving forward. So this was kind of new to me. I haven't really messed with rows too much, but now I'm going to start using this anytime I do anything like this, where it's content kind of stacked on top of each other. I recommend using rows. It's going to make your life a lot easier moving forward. Once you click row, you'll notice it brings in the 3 different columns. So of course we just want one big column. We don't want these 3. So what we need to do is select that, and underneath, make sure you're on layer, content, click this button right here where it goes into 1, and hit update row. So now when I go back into row, it's going to just show that 1. And you can keep these at default. You just want to make sure that the position is at the top. So it's always being forced at the top. And then underneath style, we're going to change out a few different things right here. And what we need to do is make sure that we're on row. And right down here where there's this spacing, this is your padding. So what we're going to want to do is add some padding to this so it kind of pushes down the screen a little bit. So if we change this top one to 60, we can also change this one to 60 for the right. The bottom, let's do like a 20, so it kind of has a nice gap. And change this to 60. So once you do that, you'll notice that this is the white part right here. This is where we're going to add our content and then fill it down. And underneath size and position, you're going to want to make sure we have a layer area selected. All of this can be by default. And underneath advanced, I think we could just keep everything at default. Everything looks good there. So now what we're going to do is underneath column, we're going to add in an image. So hover over add layer and just click image right here. And when you do that, you're going to notice it throws it above that column. So what we need to do is drag it underneath that column. So now when we do that, you're going to notice it brings it in with all that padding around it. So that's exactly what we want. So again, you want to make sure that your row has this padding right here of 60 on the top, 60 on the right, 20 on the bottom, 60 like on the left. And then by default, you're going to notice that the column has some padding as well. So we can actually remove that because you don't really need it in most cases. So let's go ahead and underneath column, you see right here it says default 10 on the right. We could change that to 0. So now there won't be any of this extra column gap. We're going to do that at the row. I know it's a little complicated, but once you kind of start to play around with these values yourself, you'll see what it does in real time. So now that we have all of the padding correctly on the row and the column, now we can go ahead and adjust the width of this image right here to make sure that it fills up the whole width. And in order to do that, you just select on the image itself. And what we need to do is underneath size and position, you're going to notice we're on size and position for the image. By default, it's going to bring it in at some pixels. For example, this was 300 pixels, but what we want to do is change this to 100% width. And you can see right here, it's at 100% width. So now that's going to fill up the width and keep that aspect ratio correctly. And if for some reason your feature images are going to look out of whack, what you can do is either change the width here or change the whole width of the container. Hopefully that makes sense, because the way it works is I have these at like a 16 by 9 aspect ratio, and this width of this whole entire slider fits perfectly once it's at 100%. So now what we need to do is one last thing, and then your images will start to pull in the featured image, and that's underneath content. You're going to want to make sure this says image from stream if exists. That's basically saying if this is dynamic content, click this button right here. So once you do that, you can hit save, and now you can hit the preview button, and you're going to notice that your feature images are going to start to come in. So you can scroll through right here, and your featured images are coming in. So now we're going to pull in the title of the post right here. And in order to do that, you just go underneath add layer and click this button where it says text. And then what I recommend is you're going to notice it always comes in above the row. So what we need to do is to click and drag it below that image. And if you ever need to change the title of these things, you can always just do that right here. You can just double click on it and change it to featured image, just so it's, a little bit easier to understand what's going on here. So now that's the title, and let's double click this and type in a post title. This will make your life a lot easier if you start to name these things. And when you pull that in, you're going to notice it just pulls it in wherever the heck it wants. So what we need to do is change this to be position. You can see right here, if you have it selected underneath content, instead of absolute, we need to change that to relative. So watch what happens when you click that. It's going to snap it underneath here. So that's why I was saying this row stuff is really powerful, because you can position it how you want and it will just start to stack on top of each other. Let's go underneath style, and you can change your font family. In our case, we use this font right here. And text color, you just click on here and make that blue. So now we need to pull in the title dynamically. So this is going to be a little bit different. And what we need to do is click on the title right here, and underneath where it says content, we can delete this thing where it says new layer. And what's cool about Slide Revolution, they see this button right here called meta. This is going to pull in, if you click on post right here, this is going to pull in all of your meta descriptions and all of that type of stuff. So in this case, it needs to say title. So this right here where it says post title, this is where we're going to pull in the post title. So this is pulling the metadata. So once you click that, it's going to say title. So now if we just click save, you're going to notice that when you click on preview now, that title is now going to pull in the title of that post. So as you can see, that right there is pretty cool. It just pulls in the title. And I'm going to show you how to make all of these things clickable at the end of this part of the tutorial. So let's go ahead and add in everything else, and then I'll show how you can make the image clickable, this clickable, and then the buttons, of course, is going to be clickable. But let's jump into how we can style this up a little bit so it looks a little bit better than this. So you can see where it pulls in the title a little bit and adds a little bit of a gap. Let's go ahead and do that right now. In order to do that, you just click the title, click under style, and then underneath spacing, this is where we're going to go ahead and add some different margins. So if you can see right here, these are your margins up here and your padding. So let's go ahead and add a 20. So that will push it down a little bit. And let's add 20 to the left and the right. So underneath the right, add 20. And the left, let's add 20. So now you can see it's pushed in right here. So it looks very similar to how this is right here. And of course, if you want to change the size of the fonts, that's all right up in here. So I think this looks okay at 20 pixels right now. So if I hit save and hit this preview button, you're going to notice that it's pulling in that right there. So now let's go ahead and add that white background underneath. So now that we have the title, you're going to notice that I have it as a white background right here. That way it's going to pop a little bit more and show more of it as like a card. And in order to do that, that is underneath your column. So if you just click right here where it says column, and by default, it's going to have the background color as transparent. Let's just go ahead and click on white, click save and preview. And now you're going to notice that that module has a white background. So everything looks like cards now. So that's how you add the title. Now let's go ahead and jump into how we add the excerpt. So just like the title, we're going to go ahead and underneath add layer, click on text. And let's double click, change this layer to excerpt. And just like the post, pull it underneath. And it's going to be just like the other one where it floats out here in space. So what we need to do is underneath content, position, change that to relative. That's going to push it underneath there. Let's style this up a little bit so it looks like the other one. So if we go ahead and here, change it to, let's say, in this case, we don't want it to be blue. Let's do like a black color, or in this case, 333 is kind of our color. And just like the other one, let's add some spacing to it. We can do 10 at the top for the margin. So now push it down, push it in 20 pixels on both sides. So now it will line up right here. The font looks good at 20 pixels as well. You can go a little bit smaller or bigger, whatever it may be. And just like the other one, underneath content, let's delete where it says new layer. And underneath meta, post, we need to do the post excerpt. So once you click that, it's going to add the dynamic meta tag right here. And that's all you have to do. Once you do that, you just hit save. Let's preview this. Let's make sure this looks okay. And yeah, as you can see, it's pulling in 10 words. So just like that setting in the beginning. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's go ahead and make some changes to that so you understand what this is doing. So if you go underneath the general settings and underneath content, let's change that to 2 words. So you can see what happens if you just change that to 2 words, hit preview. It's going to just show 2 words. I'm here, ... So those dots are being pulled in dynamically through WordPress. If you don't want those, you're going to have to add like some sort of a like advanced custom function to get rid of those, I believe. So I think it looks good because then you can add this button right here. It says read more. So the user knows that there's more to this. So that's what is good about this read more button. So let's go ahead and add that back to about 10 words. And you can do 10 words right there. I think that's good. I've done a lot of testing on this and I found around 8 to 10 words fits this pretty well. So let's go ahead, hit save. And now when you go back into here, you're going to notice it says 10 words right here. So that's how you do the post excerpt. And now let's jump into how to add the button. And in order to add the button, you just go into add layer and right here where it says button. Once you click that, it's going to pull up all these different presets over here. So if you like one of these, you can just click on here and it will automatically pull in that button styling and you can change it later. So I believe I click on this one right here. And once you do that, just like the other stuff, it's going to pull in the button at the top. So let's go ahead and rename this to read more, something like that. Click and drag it below the excerpt. So now that's going to float up here. And if you remember, what we need to do is position needs to be relative. And when you do that, it's going to pull in automatically full width. So in this case, what we can do is do an inline block right here. And what that's going to do is just make it as big as the font size. So if you go underneath the font size, and let's say I make this really big. Let's say I make this like 30. It will increase the width of the button. But let's go ahead and just change that back into what it was by default, which looked pretty good at like 17 pixels. And underneath here, let's just change up that. And the background color, let's change it to one of our colors right here. So it's a little bit lighter. Here's a little bit of a different setting. So if you go up here, you see this button says hover. So now we can change what the hover color is going to be. So if you click on hover, underneath background color, let's change this to like a blackish. So if I go here, change that to like black. Now you can see this is the hover state. And of course you can change all of the other different things in here. Font color, all of those things. But let's just go ahead and here, and I think that looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and add some spacing to this so it's not so bumped up right here. So underneath style, we can go underneath and just like the other ones, let's add 20 pixels or so to the left. So now it's bumped up right here. And what we can also do is add a little bit to the top as well, maybe like 10 pixels. So it kind of pushes down the screen right here. So now we got this. I think that looks good. So now we have the title, excerpt, and the button right here. Let's hit save. Let's just see what happens right here. So that looks pretty good. So now we have the title here, excerpt here, and the button right here. So yeah, that looks like the example that we have right here. Looks pretty close to me. So let's go ahead and change what this button says. So by default it says click here, but what you can do is underneath content, we can change this to read more. So whatever you type in here, the button's going to update as well. So that's how you add the button. Now I'm going to show you how to make these things clickable. I'm going to show you how to make the image clickable to the post, the title, and this button, of course. So let's jump into that right now. In order to make these things clickable, there's two different ways that we're going to approach this. The very first one is going to be using this Actions tab right here. The next one is we're going to be using a little bit of HTML to make this clickable, and then the read more button is just going to be like the image up here where you click on Actions, and then you're going to be able to add a simple link. But first, let's jump into the title. And the reason I want to jump into that is to show you what this meta tag is that we need to link to. This will make sense in a moment. So as you can see, when you click on meta and you go down to post, you see this one right here where it says the link to the post. This is actually the dynamic link to your post. So what you need to do is go ahead and copy this right here where it says link inside these two brackets. That's going to make it where when you hover over this, you can see in the bottom left, this is going to show you where it's going to go to, which is the post link. And you'll probably notice that the title changed. So what we need to do is remove this right now and just copy this to our clipboard because we're going to be using that to link these two, and I'll show you how to do the HTML. So let's go ahead and just delete that, go back to the title. Now let's jump into our image underneath Actions. What we need to do is click Simple Link, and when you click that, it's going to show, you want to make sure that it's on click, Simple Link, and here's the link URL. You just want to paste that in there. You can keep everything else by default, and now that's going to be clickable to that link. Same thing underneath your Read More button. Just go underneath there, click on Actions, Simple Link, where it says link URL, just paste in that link with the brackets. Hit Save, and now you're going to notice that when you click on Preview, this is now going to be clickable. So then you can see the mouse cursor is going to change, and in the bottom left, you can see that it's going to dynamically show where that's going to go to. So when you click inside here, it will actually go to that post, so you can see that it actually worked correctly. So that's how you do that. Now let's jump into how you make the title clickable inside here. In order to make this title clickable, we just need to paste in this HTML code right here. And if you never really mess around with the HTML code, it's very simple. This is just a href equals, and then this is the link that we just copied and pasted for the featured image and the button. And then this closes that bracket and is wrapped around this thing called title. So that's making it where this title is being wrapped by that link that we just posted inside here. Hopefully that makes sense. If you're not really familiar how to use HTML, you could just copy and paste this and it should work as is. So this is just doing an href title and then closing that href. So this is going to make it where it's all clickable. Hopefully that makes sense. So once you do that, you're going to hit save. And let's hit a preview, and you're probably going to notice that depending on your theme, I'm using Elementor in this case, this title might change colors. So now I'm going to show you how you can change that, because if you change the title color right here, you're going to notice it doesn't update it because it's not updating as if it was a link. So you're going to have to add a little bit of CSS code if your title changes to red in this case. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And if you click underneath the title and you click on attributes, what we need to do is give this a class name. So in this case, I'm just going to call it something like slider link. So what you need to do, just copy and paste or type in slider link right here. And now I'm going to show you how you can add CSS to the whole slider. And what this is going to do is just change the color of that link. So to do that, you just go underneath this cog right here. So this is going back to the main general settings of the whole entire carousel. Click on CSS jQuery, and you can just paste this in right here. So this is just calling the class slider link, the A, which is the A ref I just referenced, and then you can just type in whatever color you want in here. So this is like our branded blue color. You could just close that, hit save, and then hit preview. The reason why I hit save a lot is two reasons. When you start to mess around with CSS and stuff like that, you need to make sure that you save it so the preview is working correctly. And I like to just always back up things, because if your internet goes out or your browser closes, you're not going to lose a lot of work. So now when you click on preview, you're going to notice that red color is gone and now it's this blue color. So as you can see, we pretty much have everything ready to go. So this is clickable. This is now clickable. This is showing 10 words, and that is now clickable. And that is pretty much the whole entire tutorial on how to do this. Now, if you want to add extra functionality like the arrows and things like that, I'm going to show you how to do that right now. But if you're happy with the way that looks right there without the arrows, and let me hit click preview again, you could just run with that and everything should be good. To add the arrows, you're just going to click this button right here. This is going to pull in your navigation options. So the reason why I wanted to add all this extra padding on your row right here is so that your buttons can appear within the padding right here. So as you can see right here, this is actually all that padding. And now we're going to show you how to add the arrows. So if you click underneath arrows right here, we can just turn this on. And by default, you're going to notice when you turn that on, it's going to add the arrows to the sides right here. So that's not what we want because that's going to show the arrows way at the end. What we want to do is where it says align by, you're going to want to make sure that you click content. And when you do that, that's for the left arrow, and you also want to do that for the right arrow. So automatically you can see that it's pulling in this style of arrow right here. So if you want to change out these arrows the way it's styled, you could just click right here. So once you find a style you like, you can go ahead and make some customizations right here. So in this case, I don't want these to be bumped in so much. The rate by default is like 30 pixels. Let's go ahead and change this to 10 pixels on the left, about 10 pixels to the right. And of course, if you want to position these anywhere else, you can always change the alignment for just one of them or both of them. So that's what's really nice. They give you the different options. And then underneath here, you can also change out how it's going to look when you hover over each one of these things. Actually, let me go here and do 10 pixels on the right. So like I said, you can go ahead and change out the hover background color. So let me change this to like 333. So now when I hover over it, it's going to be not so dark. So you can play around with these things right here. I think I'm going to keep this at 40 pixels for the background size. Arrow size is 20. Like I said, they give you a lot of different options down here. So let's go ahead, hit save, and let's see how that looks. By default, it should pop up in just a second. And you can see, yeah, it works right there. And now the user can click on these and it should interact correctly. So if you go back and forth, that should work. And if for some reason you want this to show slower or faster or not even have a delay, you can change this right here underneath the visibility. So that's going to have a little slow fading effect of 1 second. So if I go back here, you could see it would take about 1 second and then come in. So if you don't want that, you can always turn that off right there. And now the last thing I'm going to cover is how to add this progress spinner right here. Very simple to do. So what you need to do is scroll up into here underneath your navigation options, click on progress, turn this on, and in this case underneath style I have it as circle. I guess that means CW means clockwise, or you can do counterclockwise or flip. And underneath background, let's change this instead of transparent because you can't see it. Let's change this to like a blue color. And underneath here, you're going to want to make sure you click on layer area. I'm going to change this to the bottom. As you can see, it's really small. You can barely even see it. So let's go ahead and change that to like 16. So that's a little bit bigger. And let's make it so it's not so bumped up underneath here. So underneath the y-axis, you can change this to 20. And now that's going to push that up. That's all you have to do. Just click on save, click on preview, and it should appear right here. And if you remember before, we have it at 4 seconds. And so it's more like 5 seconds I've noticed. So it might be a little bit off the milliseconds, but you could see right here, it starts and takes about 4 to 5 seconds to go through each slide. So that's how you could do that. And that's it for how to do this. Now, let me show you how to grab your shortcode, or in this case, I'm going to show you how easy it is to inject this into a regular Gutenberg website, or if you're using Elementor. So if you're just going to be using a shortcode and you know how to inject that into your website, you could just go underneath the cog right here, the general options. You can change this, let me just call it like post slider demo or something. And let me change the alias or slug name. So when you update this, this is going to be the title of your Slide Revolution title. So it's going to make it a little more organized. Let's hit save. And then you can just click this button right here. This is your shortcode. So if you know how to add shortcodes to your website, you could do that right here. I also noticed that underneath, if you're using a regular Gutenberg website, that's automatically a block already. So you can just click on here and you're going to notice this one called Slide Revolution. So once you click that, it's going to automatically pull up all of the different sliders you have. So in this case, it's this one right here. You just click the plus button. I'm going to hit update and let's see, make sure this works okay on the front end. So if we hit preview, looks good to me. Everything looks good. One thing I did notice was when I had that in Gutenberg, this right here, I went underneath my CSS and I added this right here called text decoration none. So this is just a CSS class that will remove any like underlines or anything like that brought on by the theme, or in this case, it's just WordPress. So if I go back here and hit refresh, you're going to notice that that title has an underline. So if you happen to have a website and it has the underline for the title, that's because the theme, or like I said, WordPress is automatically adding this by default. So you can just go ahead and add that CSS and then we'll remove that. And very similar to how this works inside Elementor, you can go ahead and let me go to this page. And instead of that, let me go ahead and remove. And let me hit update and edit with Elementor. And just like with Gutenberg, there's automatically like a pre-built widget or block, or whatever you want to call it these days. So if I just type in Slide Revolution, you can just pull that in right here and automatically it's going to pop up. Just click that button and that's it. You're good to go. Hit update and let me make sure this looks okay on the front end. And yeah, that looks good. In this case, I didn't need to add that CSS class to get rid of that underline because Elementor doesn't have that. Now, one thing you might notice is you see how inside here, I can change the width of this to be really small. So if let's say I add in another column or something, let me say I add in like 3 extra columns. You would think that the slider would just take up this little column width, but it doesn't work that way. And that's because you told in Slider Revolution, if you remember right here underneath layout, you did full width. So for some reason, if you're wondering why you're throwing this in and it's not taking into consideration your column width, you could just change that right here to something like auto. And what that's going to do is now if I hit refresh right here, it would just fill up that little container. So in most cases, you probably don't want that. But if you aren't familiar with how that works, Slide Revolution is going to override that stuff. So it's best to just figure out how you want to lay it out first and then figure out, how you're going to do it. And that's it for the Slider Revolution tutorial. Make sure that you give it a like, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and hit that bell to receive notifications when I release new tutorials like this. Again, this is Mark from Wiki Design.